Hello, everybody. The code reviews are back, and we have a star developer in the ecosystem, Jazz. He's been contributing to a lot of projects, and especially one of the core contributors at Near Builders or Build DAO. And you guys might have been seeing Near as the AI chain, the number one AI chain. And you may have seen also Near as having a lot of robust DAO tooling and smart contracts, but a lack of interfaces. And then recently, Bitte, which is kind of the AI rebrand from Mintbase, developed their own wallet. And inside of their wallets, they have these ways to make agents, on-chain agents that build transactions and actually execute within the AI section of their wallet interface. So Jazz did basically solve two ecosystem needs in one, where he built on-chain agents, but also built it for Sputnik DAO, which is the primary DAO contract there. So on this code review session, Jazz is going to be basically breaking down that process of how he built the agent, how to build with Bitte, and then also answering any questions. So without further ado, Jazz, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Shad, and thanks for having me here. I've been personally thinking to talk about this a little bit as well. So I'm excited for this opportunity to dive right into it. Um, I'll just take, I don't know, 5 seconds to talk about the Bitte wallet a little bit. Like you go to the wallet and you're logged in with your credentials, and then you have this AI tab where you could write a bunch of uh, language and this just get some on-chain stuff done. For instance, uh, let's say do swap USDC for Near, although I don't think I would have any USDC right now. So let's find out what this does. It would probably give me a way to do it. And then also flag that I don't have enough USDC right now. Um, I'll let this take a minute. So one of the things the whole agent framework at Minbase/Bitte let you do is spin up these agents very, very quickly. And to be honest, they do not need any, I would say, AI, machine learning, deep learning prerequisites, which was very helpful for me because from the outside, it might seem like you need to be good at ML AI, but the agenting plugin framework is built in a way that you don't really have to do it. You actually just need one thing, which is a little bit inside working knowledge of how Near protocol work, how different transactions are created, etc. And this is what the agent uses uh, to do stuff. The transaction to swap. Da, da,
Just
da.
kind of reiterating on that.
Yep.
So you only need the endpoints for how to like generate the transactions, and then on the wallet, like Bitte has their own LLM router service that kind of plugs into these endpoints. Like how does it work from the wallet end where you can just like not even
Yeah.
integrate
Yeah.
an LLM?
Yeah. So exactly. I think I'm not sure how they've internally containerized it. Maybe the wallet is different, the LLM is different, but from the outside, it's all black box, and you don't really care. What you really care about is that how this whole wallet application consumes this description of your APIs, different APIs that you have, and then the LLM internally sort of handles your uh, converting your prompts into API parameters, and then just call the agent that you have deployed, and then your agent either gives back a transaction or gives back an information that you would show uh, on the UI here. So we will talk about how LLM sort of does that. But just to reiterate on what you're saying, you personally as a developer of the agent don't really have to worry about an LLM or setting up one or training one or know about LLM to say the least. So you need no prerequisites of LLMs and downloading them, training them, nothing. You just need to write simple APIs, and you have to write this API spec that the plugin system consumes and then just works magically. So you don't have to worry about any of the LLM stuff as a agent developer yourself.
And then like for APIs, this is near API JS. You don't even have to know Rust. You can just interact with calling the contracts like you normally would in any front end application.
Yeah. These are backend APIs. You don't necessarily have to write it in JS, but because near API JS is the most popular library to interact with near blockchain, writing it in JS helps. But you can very well write it in Rust because the LLM is only going to consume the APIs and then the API specs. So it doesn't really matter in what language the backend is written in. But I think writing it in JS helps because near API JS abstracts all this functionality. In Rust, you'd have to write a lot of boilerplate code to connect to the blockchain.
And then one more question before you get
Um,
into it. Like and you don't even necessarily have to do a transaction. Like I could theoretically make a CoinGecko agent and pull in from their API, and they would basically interface that with prices. Like this could theoretically be off chain as well and integrated into their wallet.
yeah. Your API could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to generate transactions. Like there would be APIs in which you want to create transaction and let your users do something on chain. But if you want to create simple APIs for just information, you don't really have to do it. For instance, I created this API in which you could ask the agent what all DAOs you're a part of. So you simply say, could you tell what all DAOs just.near is part of? And then it'll give you a bunch of names of the DAOs that you're part of. So these DAOs can be purely read-only informational APIs as well. The agents can be just uh, reading from a bunch of data and giving you that information. They don't necessarily have to create transactions, etc., etc. So you essentially don't even need your wallet, so to speak, to be logged in. I'm sure you'll have to log in the UI to get access to this page, but otherwise, it doesn't have to interact with your wallet, your keys, your transactions at all. It could only simply be some information API which would give you what DAOs you're part of, what's the current price of Black Dragon token or whatever information you want. So you can have all kinds of non-on chain, off chain, as you said, APIs. So for instance, this API here just gives you the information of a fungible token's metadata. So you can basically say, give me information about Black Dragon, and it will fetch that information um, from Ref API, I guess, and just gives you that information. It isn't creating any transaction and stuff. And then there's the swap API, which actually gives back a swap transaction for a token in and a token out and a quantity of your choice. So yeah, that's an example of read-only API and then an API that gives you a transaction and then you can sign it in the wallet. So yeah. Should we go ahead?
Yeah, if you want to kind of break down the ref example and a little bit of like how you began to dissect how to design this DAO agent.
Yeah. That's actually one of the first things I wanted to talk about, which is basically how does this whole framework actually even work, right? I think going through the ref agent is a good example, but we can also just go through the DAO agent so that we could kill two birds with one stone. So what you basically have to do is create this backend API, right? You could use any framework you like here. We're using Elysia, I guess. So this is a fork of the DAO agent. So I've only put up the stuff that I needed to, and the rest of the boilerplate is from their template. So the way the whole framework kind of work is basically you have this, I guess, wallet slash LLM/plugin system, which is hosted by Bitte themselves, right? So this is a black box to you. You don't really need a lot of information on how this works. And then you can know that wallet.bitte.ai will give you access to this wallet where you could do regular wallet stuff. And then you also have this smart actions page where you could create transactions just via writing prompts. Now, how does this interact with your agent is something like this. Let's say you have a backend API called /API/DAOs/your name. What this API does is basically gives you all the DAOs a near name is part of, right? So you have created this API. I can show you in the code how this kind of work. So let's say this DAO/account ID is a get API. And then this is Spike Speaks API key. I'll change this. I'm gonna move over, but it's fine. And then it just calls the PikeSpeak API and get all the DAOs for a particular user, and then it just sends back to whoever is sort of calling this DAO, this API. I actually have this API working here. So let's say I say DAO/Jaswinder.near, and it gives me all the APIs that I'm part of: enrollment, Harmonic, Marma-J research, onboard DAO, etc. So what's happening here is, and then I have to also, along with the API itself, I have to write this open API spec for what the API actually does, right? I still have to do it for the get DAOs stuff because I was just writing that, but I have it for another API which lets you create proposals for transferring here. So basically, whatever your API does, you have to describe this in this open API spec. And this is not something you're doing out of the blue or different. A lot of APIs are actually documented the same way. So it's not like something you're doing which is different than regular API practices or software engineering practices. So you'd have to describe your API pretty well in this doc. So basically, what does the API do? What do you want to call it? What are the different parameters it takes? And then description of all the parameters. For instance, is the DAO parameter, is the receiver parameter, and then there's quantity. And then you also describe an example response. So you would say that this API gives you back a transaction. And then these are the different properties of the transaction. There's signer ID, there's public key, there's none, so receiver ID, actions. And then in actions, you would say it has a function call action, which basically lets you do a custom call or even a regular call as well. And then you describe stuff like block hash, which is all the contents of your transaction ID. So this is what a transaction ID on Near looks like of all these elements. So you're basically describing this in your open API spec. Now, the way the whole plugin system works is it uses this open API spec. So one of the requirements of developing your agent is that you have to create this open API spec, right? So I have it for the DAO agent. If you look at the ref example, they have it for, hold on, so for ref agent, they have the ref APIs described here as well, the description, the parameters, the responses, etc., etc. So now and then you deploy this application with your open API spec, and your API is working on any kind of backend. The easiest is to just do it on vercel, let's say, but you could deploy it anywhere. Then what the agent does is use this live URL of wherever your agent is deployed, and then the open API spec that you have created which has the information of what this API is. Now, this API spec is sort of the magic sauce here, because this is the thing which is actually consumed by the LLM agent to understand what your API does, and then how your prompts can be converted to use these APIs. So let's say now I go to the wallet UI and I write something like what all DAOs just.near is part of. The LLM will see, and I think there are agent specific UI. So when you're inside the UI, you can pick what agent you're using, if I'm not wrong, or maybe it does that internally. But when you write a prompt like this, the LLM and the plugin system will jump to the DAO agent. We'll see that DAO agent is the agent which would fulfill a query related to a DAO or a prompt related to a DAO. And then it will see from the API spec which of the APIs make sense for this kind of query. And then it will parse this prompt into API parameters. So for instance, it will parse this into something like the agent deployed URL, let's say it's called agent.com, DAOagent.com. And then it'll parse the API parameters, which is /API/DAOs/just.near, because all of this information with examples was inside the API spec. So your LLM knows about your APIs now. So your prompt has been passed into an API call now, and then the plugin system just makes this call just like we did on our UI.
So you're just taking like, okay, so now can you kind of break down this process? You now you have all these kind of endpoints of these APIs that you're building. How do you begin to like develop like the read methods and the write methods, and like look at a contract, begin to pick its functionality, and then turn them into an endpoint?
Yeah, I think that's a good question in terms of how the insides of an API would work. Let me just touch upon that a little bit. Let's look at the API here, which basically lets you create a proposal to the DAO to transfer some amount of near. For me, I have personally looked into the Sputnik DAO contracts a lot many times. So I had some knowledge of how it worked, but I think looking at the contract itself is also a great way to find this out. Sputnik DAO 2 is what works right now, I guess. If you go to the library and you see propose here, if I'm not wrong. So here in the contract itself, you can see that you can create a proposal, and then it lets you choose this add proposal, and then the add proposal will let you do all these different kinds of proposals. Also lets you do act and stuff. Okay. It's been a while I visited the smart contract, so it's fine. So hold on. Another way I kind of been doing these days is just look at the contract on Nearblocks. So let's say I do, I don't know, harmonic v1 dot sputnik DAO dot near, if I'm not wrong. So you can look at the contract functions, and then you have, let's say, something called as add proposal. So add proposal basically lets you add proposals to your, how do I get rid of this stuff? Nope. Anyway, so I think I look at this later on. Right. So this sort of basically takes you to how do you add proposals, and they're basically of these kinds. You have change policy, you have transfer, and then you have set staking contract. Check permission of the caller to do it, and then it actually adds the proposals, I guess. So what we are doing is a transfer proposal. You can also, I don't know, look at near blocks to see what different arguments it takes, etc., parameters it takes. Hold on, I'm just gonna get rid of this. How do I get rid of this panel on the top? I hate it.
What pat like the Chrome on the top?
The zoom panel on the top, don't you see it?
No, I don't see it.
Okay, that's just me.
That
And
you,
blocks
but
my
even
view
if
too.
it's there, you gotta drag it out the way. You gotta just like take a part that's not a button and just like move it.
Oh, alrighty, alrighty. Okay, done. Um,
But
so
this is what
yeah,
confusing me
I
about Rust
guess
contracts though, because like with Rust contracts, like they actually it just like a lot of times they structure each parts of the functionality into like proposals. You have a lib.rs and to me it's always easier to go into the interface that's provided by NearBlock. So it like yeah, it's like is there an automated way to do this to just take in the contracts and convert it into API code, or is this more of a manual process?
yeah, I'm afraid it's more of a manual process. One thing that does help me is just look at transactions and try to decode from there. For instance, let's say I pick an ad proposal here, and you see that this is what the transfer proposal looked like. So I think when I did the transfer API, this is how I kind of figured out what the arguments were. So you
Didn't
have
they
the description, you have the kind.
didn't they add to the near CLI like the ability to basically rebuild the transaction from the hash?
Uh, they might have. I'm not sure. I haven't tested that. I've seen that too, but I'm not sure. That's another thing, because this is an old contract, but by now we have the ABI support. So if you're using the latest near SDK Rust and you did do the ABI stuff, then everybody can see your function names and the parameters it takes, etc., etc. So it gets a lot more easier. But because these are older contracts and they don't have ABI support, you can't really see it. But once these contracts have ABIs, and most of the new contracts would have ABI, you can feed that ABI file into some sort of LLM processing, and hopefully write all of this stuff a little bit easier without having to visit 3, 4 different interfaces to find out what the arguments look like. But people don't follow the whole ABI stuff that much. Even the new contracts don't do it, although there is support for all of it now in the SDK.
So in a situation like if you go to an Ethereum block explorer, like if you don't upload the ABIs or verify the ABIs, you can't develop that interface that you saw in your blocks. So how is it for like a legacy contract like Sputnik DAO? You can go and you can play and interact with each of the functions, but yeah, but like there may have not necessarily been a associated ABI with that. Like how does what's different?
So fetching function names is, I would say, easier, and you don't really need ABI for that. What you need ABI for is basically what goes into each function and then what it returns, I guess. So there is auto detect, and sometimes it works, but most of the times it doesn't. Like if you have something complex, then the auto detect doesn't work. But with ABI, all the arguments and the return and whatever, it becomes a little bit more descriptive. So you can see that fetching function names is fine. You can do that without ABIs. That's why all of this works, although this is an old contract. Um, but individual function and its parameters and what it returns, I think that is difficult without ABI.
Interesting. Well, how do you begin to pick which method like to do first? Like you did a lot of the create proposal, but why not vote proposal? Why not like what is kind of your thinking of like which ones to tackle first when looking at the contract?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually wanted to, because in my head, I felt like if you look at the wallet UI, and it is still unclear to me, so I have to talk to Bitte team about this, but I'm not sure how exactly they would display information from my APIs. Like even now, when I have the all DAOs API, I'm not sure how would they display all the DAO names here. Would they display the JSON? Would they parse it, etc.? So I'm a little bit unclear on it. But I was sure that they can return a transaction from the API easily. And I feel like so there are, I think the most amount that I personally use Sputnik DAO contract is to create transfer proposals. Number one for near, and then maybe for stable coins, and then just vote on it. So my sort of priority list was do create a proposal for near transfer, then do vote yes, vote no, and then maybe then do create proposal for stable coins. Because I feel like transferring near and transferring stable coins might be the most uh, used functions from DAOs. At least that's what I do 90% of the times. So this is why I picked transferring near um, the first thing. Another pain point that I don't want to do is just swapping tokens from a DAO, because right now the way we do it is I send it to myself from the DAO, and then I swap it myself and then send it back to the DAO. The DAO can directly do it as well, but then you have to create a very complicated custom function call, and there's 100 things that can go wrong in it if you're doing it manually. So I think a swapping API for a DAO would be really nice too. Like you already have the swap API for simple accounts where you can swap your USDC to near and vice versa. Uh, doing the same for DAO would be super helpful, because a lot of the DAOs are swapping their near into stables and then stables into near, and maybe their meme tokens into near and stables and whatnot. So I feel like these are most used functions for DAOs,
Yeah.
and should be fixed. And maybe add member as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like there's a need for like a multi-agent framework because even if you vote, like you still need to like get the proposal ID, and often like if you don't have that interface, you might not know what that proposal ID is, and especially
Yeah,
in the case of the swap, you need to create the proposal and then you need to execute it, and then sometimes also have other members execute it if it's like more than like a one person on the DAO, or the threshold is higher.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
that seems like a challenge. So going back to the actual API, okay, like so kind of understanding the interface and like building that out, like before even that, like this whole like for the Elysia and the Swagger, is this what made you choose like this kind of API interface to actually build this?
Um, so I'm going to be honest, I did not pick it because I just forked the ref agent and I did not have the time to look into all of these. I honestly haven't used Alicia before myself. I've used Swagger a while ago, but not really. But I kind of trust the Minbase team to have good practices in their back pocket for all of these stuff. So I actually did not put a lot of thought into this and just forked what they had and started making changes to it. So I honestly have no idea why Elysia is better than I don't know some other framework or etc. So
Okay. So yeah, can you kind of like walk through the parameters, and I also saw you use PikeSpeak's API, so it's be interesting.
yeah. So if you look into this create transfer proposal API, this also brings me to an important part that the wallet also lets you consume uh, your account related data in the agent. For instance, when your whole wallet and your plugin LLM system is calling your API, it gives you this stuff called MB metadata, which has stuff like your account ID and your public key. Because when you're creating transaction in the backend, you would need to your transaction needs nuns and it needs a public key as well, right? And because all different people would be using the agent, you cannot have the public key here sort of hard coded. You need to get that public key from the wallet itself. The good thing is these standard stuff like account ID, the public key, etc. These are given to you from the wallet in the headers as account data. So you can see that I'm parsing headers data called MB-metadata, and then I'm fetching the account ID and public key from that. And I'm also fetching the nonce to create my transaction for that public key and for that account ID. I think this is also an important thing when you're developing the agent, that the wallet does give you this information of the person who is logged in and who's calling the API, so that you can create the transaction which is tailored for them. It's their public key, their account ID, and their nonce in the transaction itself. Because I was confused, how would the LLM agent put the nonce and put the public key in the incomplete transaction? But then I figured that the plugin system did give you everything that you needed in the headers of the call that they're making to your API. So I guess that's helpful for creating transactions. Um, the next thing I did was just to create the arguments of a transfer proposal. So proposal, its description. So this description gets displayed as a proposal description. So transfer near to whatever receiver you have put. I guess you can put amount in the description as well. Um, and then the proposal kind is transfer. It could be add member, it could be set policy, etc. And then when you're transferring near, you don't put any token ID. This is how Sputnik DAO works. Maybe it's a little bit confusing, but if you want to do any other token, you put the token ID here. But if you're doing near, you just leave it empty, and then just put the receiver in the quantity. So your parameters are used to create your function arguments, and then you're basically creating this transaction in which the function name is add proposal, and then you added the arguments, and then you're just putting the deposit and the gas, and then you have the transaction. The last thing is the nuns in the block hash. So I have some utilities to fetch that, and then your final transaction is created. You had the actions, and you had account ID, public key, and stuff, and your receiver ID where you will send this transaction. So all of that is now put together in a transaction, and then you just return the transaction. So this is an important thing to note because your API is returning back the transaction to the wallet, and then the wallet will take care of all the signature stuff. I feel like this is important from a security standpoint because your agents never get to see the private key or anything related to your wallet. Your agents are only responsible for creating an unsigned transaction, and that unsigned transaction goes back to the wallet, and then the wallet displays it here. Like, so this was an unsigned transaction sent by the agent, and then I am seeing it. They're parsing the transaction, and now I can approve it or decline it. So it's not like stuff is auto approved or auto declined, or the agent get access to the wallet somehow. They do not. They can just create unsigned transactions, and then the wallet actually
Hey, can
shows you.
you click transaction details so they could see it build?
Yeah, yeah, you can see what the actual functions were called, because first of all, you're depositing some near to ROP.near contract, and then you call the USDC contract, and then you do near withdraw from wrap.near. So I think that's the whole cycle when you're trying to do swap, USDC swap. So all of this gets rendered as well. I can actually quickly show you the DAO API as well, because I have the. So this is also something we can talk about in a minute, but Minbase has this playground tool where you could create your APIs, and then you can test it on this sort of a playground URL, and you don't really have to talk to any one of the teams. It's pretty much self-sufficient, and it's a playground, and it doesn't get exposed to outer public. So it's a testing environment where you can test all these agents. The only thing you have to do is deploy your API service on vercel, on GCP, wherever you're comfortable. And then they have this plugin endpoint called API/AI plugins. And then you have to just register your plugin with the deployed URL you have. And then you can just start accessing it on this playground URL. So I currently have the DAO agent that I created on this playground URL. So I can say something like, put up a proposal to build sputnik-DAO.near to transfer 1 near to James.near, plugging in a lot of names. James.near, and I'm gonna go click, and I hope this works. I haven't tested this in a long time. You can see that it's a little bit inconvenient to write the DAO name. So I'm actually working on some discoverability APIs, which would help you get the DAO address from just saying build DAO, or I don't know, onboard DAO and stuff. You can see that
in this case though, you would have to build that into your endpoint, like the API call to basically map the name.
Yeah.
There's no kind of
Yeah.
interaction as of now.
Yeah. Nothing for now. And I actually have a good example for that, because they do the same for in ref agent as well, because they have all these allow list tokens list, in which they've put all these tokens where there's the address, and then there's the name. So basically from the name, you can fetch the DAO address. You can do this with a very manual way of creating a list, or you can actually put a small LLM here that does some ML there to do some sort of name matching and stuff.
Interesting. So
So,
you can build a LLM into your API and like kind of make it multi-agent.
I mean, yeah, your APIs could use anything. Like they could use their own sophisticated tech to do all of this stuff, right? They can blacklist people, whitelist tokens, whatever you want to do. Inside can your agent inside could be making calls to GPT-4 or Cloud to do something else, to do some other natural language processing or whatnot. So it's up to you, whatever you want to put into your APIs. Um, the, the the only thing is that the whole plugin system, OpenAPI spec, parsing LLMs, creating prompts into API server is one thing, and then your agent doing ML internally, AI internally is its own thing, right? Um, if you look at this transaction, we have the add proposal transaction to build.sputnik DAO.near. Amount is 1 near. For some reason, it puts the deposit as 1 near instead of. Let me look at the function call. If you look at the arguments of the add proposal, it has transfer 1 near to James.near. Interesting.
What? Why did it replace the token ID with near?
Uh, yeah, it's kind of malfunctioning, honestly, because if you look here, I do transfer near to the receiver, but it has already appended transfer 1 near to James.near in the description. And then also in token ID, it puts near, although that's actually pretty weird because the LLM don't really have access to the arguments here at all. So it should actually just give this hard-coded thing out. But it has also changed the deposit a little bit because this is a fixed 0.1 near deposit. This is kind of spooky that it changed the arguments of the API. Maybe
Yeah,
I'm using some outdated version, but I can check into that. But
I've
this
been
is cool.
I've been looking into like LangChain structured outputs and also OpenAI has like a structured output. That's one thing I'm encountering in the problems with having LLMs like consistently return like structures of data. But this is really weird that it's passing an argument that's not even variable. Maybe it's versioning.
Yeah, yeah. I should talk to I should talk to Bitte guys and why this is happening because this is very weird. Because the agent is only supposed to parse your prompt into API parameters, but inside all of this is just regular stuff. But when this goes back, or maybe it's not using maybe it's not using the agent at all, and it's just creating the transaction by itself. I'm
I
not
mean,
sure.
if you're in the debug playground with your DAO agent for Vercel out there, so like you're
Oh
not
yeah, that's also true. Yeah,
globally.
I don't know. I would check with the team, but this is this is like spooky agents taking over. Next time you're trying to send somebody, next time you're trying to send an agent 1 near, and it sends itself all your near, and then he's he's doing weird stuff online, and then you don't have any control on it anymore.
And then
Um, but
there's
yeah,
to the deposit and the amount. So basically, um, just to give some context. So like you're basically you as a user, you're basically requesting the DAO to send 1 year of its money, and you need to deposit a certain amount of gas to trigger that transaction. Each DAO may have usually 0.1, or if you reset it 0.01 near in order to that like there. So what is the
yeah.
deposit in that case, and like why like that's also another thing that like the agent is bugging out. So
Yeah. This deposit is fixed 0.1 near for most DAOs, at least in the API, I fixed it for 2.1. The 1 year that you put here in the prompt actually goes here. That what the DAO is supposed to transfer to James. So these two things are weird. One where it changes the description, and then the other where it changes this. So it's a little bit weird, to be honest. Let me just put this into the regular near wallet and see, sorry, Mint-based wallet, and see if um, it picks it up or it just refuses to acknowledge the prompt. Because it's possible that uh, the playground is weirding out, or maybe they're experimenting with some new LLM agent in the playground. Because the last time I checked, it gave something very accurate. So let me try this and see if this does something. Maybe it would say DAO capabilities doesn't exist or whatever.
they may have is it work? Okay, good. They turned it off earlier this week actually to like add some support. But it's looking
Yeah,
like
hold on.
okay.
Yeah, this it again says transfer one near to James, but it does again put token ID to near. So this is what I'm thinking. Um, so this is um, I'm not sure the DAO agent is live, but you can see it on the main side. So I'm thinking the LLM is creating this transaction by itself without the agent, or maybe my agent is already
although
in production. I haven't checked with them.
I mean like
Um,
that would be it would be very insightful. I'm gonna send this to the mid base. It would be very insightful if it gave you some type of context in terms of what toolkit. So like if you know that URL had some type of fab icon or something, and you can see that like, hey, I'm grabbing from this DAO toolkit. Because like you
yeah.
could update your API at any time and it could change functionalities there. Like we have a POTLOCK agent too, where we're adding functionality and endpoints and things like that. So that would be very informative.
And the changes are reflected in the Beat wallet immediately, whatever you change in your API.
I mean, like we don't have to tell them about it. It should like we once you once you're approved, like essentially it should be it should just take the spec and then the link and then just call based on kind of that endpoint, like
Yeah.
call.
For instance, I'm putting this prompt, which isn't part of my agent, which is a custom function proposal. Let's see what it does, because I'm thinking it isn't using DAO agent, and it's just winging it from everything it knows. NFT transfer, contract name,
So they just
transaction.
pulled
Oh,
from
this.
LLM.
Yeah, this is just something else. Um, cool. I think we can check with them, but this is interesting and a little bit spooky at the same time.
Yeah. Huh. So what?
Uh,
So in terms of how you're looking at it, you look at it like transferred. You have these proposal in kinds. Like you mentioned like I saw a little bit of code of like querying which DAOs I'm a part of. Like what are you thinking of literally every proposal kind? I'm gonna make its own endpoint, or like how are you like what is the best way to structure an endpoint given that there's so many different parameters even for one like function.
yeah. So one of the things is I'm not looking to develop any new backend APIs just yet. So I'd be using Pikes Peak or Nearblocks or whatever available APIs that are already there. I actually have a list of things I want to do. So this is like a proposal to Bitte itself. So this is what I'm planning to do as parts of, let's say, different releases. So an API to list all your DAOs, which you are a part of. So that's already there. And then list all the proposals or n proposals inside a DAO, and then you can see what proposals you are eligible to vote on, and then you can look into an information of a particular proposal. You can say something like, tell me what proposal 43 is all about, and then you get everything about it. And then you can vote on a given proposal, and then you can put a proposal for a simple near transfer, right? So all the discoverability functionality, and then voting functionality, and then a simple near transfer functionality is kind of, I'm thinking, as the first thing to do. And then the next thing is not just your DAO, but you can fetch all DAOs, because sometimes you want to put up a proposal in a DAO you're not a member of, and some of the DAOs allow that too. And then you can fetch DAO details with their names instead of the whole DAO address. So you'd have to put up maybe a little bit of NLP there to do that. Then all the proposals you have created, and then I feel like stable coin transfer proposals are also a high functionality, most used features. I would want to do that. And then maybe stuff like swapping from DAOs, add remove member, swapping A with B. This is kind of the natural functionality list I'm kind of thinking. I'm not sure if that answers your original question.
Yeah, I mean, mine was more on endpoint design. Like you have all these functionalities of the DAO, right? And then even within just the add proposal, you're focusing on transfer. But if I wanted to do an add member, would you build that within the same endpoint, or would you separate kind of that endpoint? And like, how are you beginning to think of it? Would you yeah, like more on the lines like breaking it up?
Oh, do you mean more APIs within the same agent, or do you mean different agents altogether?
Right now we don't have a multi-agent framework within Bitte. You can't daisy chain agents, and you don't even have structured outputs right now. So you can even reliably
Yeah,
the output of one will result in the input of another. And then there's the whole thing we discussed about like creating the proposal and executing the proposal, and the swap, and yeah, the times. There's a lot of moving elements. But I mean strictly on the context of I have all the information already and I want to do a thing. In the case for add proposal, like there's a lot of things to do. And so I mean more of these endpoints. You have these get/transfer DAO receiver.
yeah,
Like and then if you go down how you're doing pike speak, you have a different one of those. And so like
yeah,
these endpoints within the same API that belong to one agent, how would you begin to say, hey, this needs its own dedicated endpoint versus this lives within the same endpoint?
yeah. So to be honest, I would create as many endpoints as possible, because I want to keep this open API spec something very simple. Because you might have observed when you go to LLM and you put a bunch of information, it's multi-related. Sometimes it's just complex to get answers from them. But if the API does one job, it's just easier to describe, and then hopefully for the LLM to get what it does as well, right? For instance, let's say if I put a bunch of other parameters here, and then inside the same API, I handled simple proposals and I had custom function proposals, add member proposal, and everything. If I handled it to one API, my hunch is that the LLM is going to screw it up, right? So I would personally want to keep my API simple so that the description is simple as well, so that the LLM is creating that whole prompt to API parameter conversion is easier and more straightforward. So I wouldn't I wouldn't personally not club APIs together unless they're very, very similar, right? Because let's say transferring near is one kind of proposal, and then adding a member is different kind of proposal, even from a Sputnik DAO perspective as well. So to answer your question, I think I would keep APIs pretty simple, just to reduce the just to improve the accuracy of the LLM to use them, I guess.
I just want to make some clarification. So technically what's being done, like although these are agents, what makes them agentic is the LLM router like that is built in the black box of the Mint-based wallet. And what they're doing is they're using toolkits, like which in this case they have an API, which is what you're developing here. Inside those API, there are endpoints that have these different, they're
Yeah,
exposed. In this case, you have the view
yeah,
all, like you have like the transfer for that add proposal. In this case, you only built the transfer into there. And you didn't even make the variable which token yet. So it's very kind of limited functionality within this function. And then you added another endpoint within the same API for basically querying like the Pike speak AI to get all the to basically get how many DAOs you're a member of. And yeah, that's, I just kind of wanted to clear. And so basically you're saying because you all that the black box knows is what your toolkit does from the open AI specification from the
spec,
actual and it's
Open
big,
API spec, yeah.
like you would essentially just separate different APIs, different in this case vercel URLs or different like for each functionality. That way it knew specifically what it did from that black box perspective, as opposed to combine as many endpoints into the same API, even though it has to do with the same contract.
Yeah, yeah. I think the way, and I read this somewhere, that's why I was trying to Google it up. But for me, the way the whole agentic philosophy work is that your AI model cannot do everything. So you could give them these tools to use to do all this complex stuff, right? So the DAO agent is essentially a non-intelligent, at least yet, a non-intelligent tool and agent that the actual AI and LLM model use to do stuff, right? Because it's difficult to, let's say, train LLM model to create transactions accurately because it'll probably screw it up of its probabilistic nature of creating things. Um, but then this API, which is hard coded, regular programming, it will always give you the same thing if you give it the same parameters. So the whole agenting model for me is building these tools that your LLM models can use to get these to get things done that the LLM models are not good at, right? If you ask an LLM model to create a transaction, it will probably create something different every time and could be inaccurate and could be 96% accurate or whatever. So then come these tools slash agents that you plug into, which gives you non-intelligent sort of help. And so these are basically help to your LLMs. So yeah, I mean the the DAO agent is actually is a non-intelligent tool slash agent um, that the LLM uses to create transactions. Um, so
Interesting. Just to like, so just to run it back on like the quickest way to do it. And I feel like a lot of this can be like automated in some sense. So you basically have what you want the agent to do. In this case, make a transaction. You go to the contract, and then you look at the interface, you look at the past transactions, and you basically like fork the ref agent and you develop the parameters based on like what how that transaction executed, like from one of the examples, or how the interface is, or looking in the contract and looking at the method specifically and constructing that. And then like then you basically like deploy this on vercel, and then you have an endpoint and you can test it within the playground. What is the actual development environment? You're like running this locally, or how are you testing that?
um, so if you're running it locally, you cannot test it in the playground. I mean, you can test the APIs in terms of uh, what uh, what response they're giving. Like uh, this whole get all the DAOs for a user near name. I'm running this locally, so I get the JSON back. But for stuff like the transaction, I'd have to give the header values of a dummy account ID and a public ID and see if I get a unsigned transaction. But that would also probably not work because the nonce is taken from on-chain, so I'd have to give a real near name and a real public ID to fetch all of that. So you can do that. I am personally just deploying my changes to a vercel app and then just testing that newly deployed app in the playground. But as you see, the playground is really behaving weirdly, so I'll check on that a little bit. So for maybe discoverability APIs, you can test things locally because it just gives you information back. But if you have to test a full flow where a transaction gets created and then you have to sign the transaction as well, then you have to do it in the playground. And the playground needs your agent to be deployed. And then it also needs to consume the OpenAPI spec. I think that's also one of the things we kind of missed because so this is what your app looks like, and in the app itself, you can access the spec at this address over here. So I'm assuming when you make changes to your app, to the API as well as the API spec, these new changes are consumed or are updated at LLM level. I think, for instance, if you have made updates to the spec and your agent, you need to call the update UI in the playground for it to get the new changes. So yeah,
Okay.
that's the development
Okay.
environment I have right now.
And you need to so you need to do this and it'll go all the way to production if you already have it whitelisted. You need to tell the Bitte team.
Right. So all of this stays in playground. This does not push the thing to production. So they're basically saying when your agents are registered, they will not immediately be available in the production registry. The verification process is manual for now. So I'd have to talk to them and say, I've added this plugin. Could you push it to production?
But like in both of our cases, like we have agents in the wallet right now, and so like we're already approved, and so if we make an update to our repo, our vercel app, our API, is that automatic, or do we have to trigger that update in the playground for it to update, or is there an additional step of contact the team?
I'm not sure. I haven't personally tried updating it. So I'm not sure if this is just for playground or it's for production as well. But I think maybe contacting them for your updates might be the thing. Or the easiest way is to maybe just test it out, try pushing some changes and see if they're reflected in production or not. So maybe.
Can you go back? Can you go back to the Open API spec because it had more information than I thought. So like each endpoint has a description. Like I like
Yeah.
not just the overall. Okay, so theoretically you can add a bunch of endpoints and it still have context on what it does.
Yeah. And they also let you, so Open API spec is a general thingy. But Bitte team have sort of created an extension which lets you add additional metadata as they see. So this whole XMB thing is the additional thingy. So I think this is where you describe your so this part right here is a extension that these guys have created to the Open API spec. So you put your agent information here. And then you have to describe each and individual API as well. And then the LLM consumes this and it knows which it can call these APIs to do these actions.
Yeah, it
For
would be
instance,
helpful if you could run the wallet locally and then test with the playground here. So
yeah. I think the reason you can't run this locally probably is because of the whole LLM thingy. I'm not sure if they would API the LLM or the whole system itself, like openly. Right now, you access all of it through the wallet UI, but yeah, not sure.
Yeah, I
For
mean,
instance,
they don't necessarily need to do that. Because like they could keep that a black box, but like being able to run like you have the debug mode with your URL, being able to run that section,
yeah,
that would be super helpful.
yeah. One of the things that I saw recently was this whole assistant name. So, for instance, you put DAO agent here, and I think you could use that name in your prompts. I hope. Uh, so if you put a descriptive name here, it gets easier for the LLM to find it. For instance, I've named it DAO agent, so all DAO related stuff gets redirected to it, so stuff like that.
In terms of time, because I'm looking at it as it like, okay, we have all these contracts, these wish lists. Like Microchip sent me a wish list. I added some to a wish list. I also have personal wish lists. So it's like we have all these contracts where and all these methods and all these functionalities, near social, DAOs, the DeFi, creating tokens, buying tokens. There's so many kind of common actions within the space. Like what is the time that it'll take to like systematically kind of build these into APIs? And is like I feel like there should be a more streamlined way to like do this. Uh, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. I mean, I feel like there's another sort of agentic framework lurking here, which does all of this for you, which automates this for you. Because if you look at the process itself, it's pretty straightforward, which is you take the function, the smart contract function, um, and what its information, let's say if it's a near social set function, which lets you post and stuff, you take that and you take an example, and then you sort of feed that into a, I don't know, LLM prompt, and you get the API back to creating that kind of transaction. I feel like that's actually a pretty um, straightforward thing to do. Um, for instance, I would personally create such APIs probably using an LLM now, where I paste a bunch of examples and then just say, for this smart contract function, give me an API for creating this kind of transaction. So maybe we can streamline all of this a little bit more and create all these APIs and then maybe check if they're fine and then modify a little bit and then make them run. Um,
Yeah, we're actually like in the POTLOCK team. We were like designing a no code framework, kind of like basically like Zapier, but for like on chain wallets. And then one of the things that we were doing is like on chain wallets, they can have transactions tied to them, and then we like much like the CLI tool, or kind of using the transaction hash to basically generate the params and whatnot, and then being able to basically pipeline different data inflows from like different integrations was kind of what we're thinking from a design perspective on there. So that'd be really helpful. There's a few things that I like in terms of feedback. I feel like this turned to like a lot like a tutorial to like honestly like a user research interview. And uh
maybe,
what yeah, one thing that I like to see, and that we're also kind of experiment. You remember like Magic Build, like kind of like generating like the using the contract addresses and generating kind of the front ends for it. So like kind of taking this concept
yeah,
of what we're building, it's like we're combining a little bit of the two of like the vercel UI generator, so that when it generates the transaction, it also generates the UI. So in theory, like kind of combining that, and then like a multi-agent framework, and then also a way to locally kind of test your agents. I think this would be like the most powerful tool, because I mean I've been looking at different agent frameworks and even multi-agent tools. There's like Theoric, which isn't out yet. There's OLAS. I think NAPTA has some stuff too. So there's some like stuff happening, but in terms of like actually getting in like an agent in production into like a Web3 app with distribution, this is the only one that I've seen to work in. Like you see, like here, it's super easy to just create the API, but there's much a tooling that
Yeah,
definitely go.
yeah. Uh, I feel um like I really appreciate Bitte streamlining this whole process, because I feel like they sort of black box the whole LLM complexity stuff. And then because when I look at the ref agent, I I was wondering where's all the LLM stuff in this repo, and I couldn't find it. And then I sort of uh, thought about it a little bit and talked to them, and then I realized that it's all black box from us, and it's all in a all behind the curtains, and you just have to do the spec and you have to create the APIs, and all of that is taken care of. I feel like we could do a lot of similar stuff um, in the same way. Like, what other kind of agenting framework, like the Bitte transaction creator, let's say, we could do, which just consumes these helpful tools, uh, and then you, for instance, um, let's say for smart contracts which do support ABI and they have their ABIs, could we use ABIs to uh, create API for transaction creation and stuff like that? So, and then the LLM obviously need maybe some sort of RAG or fine tuning or whatnot for near's context, or context on near ABI and near smart contracts and stuff. Um, and the framework, the agenting model would probably take care of that. I'm not sure if Bitte is using something custom, or have they done any RAG or any fine tuning over near's context or whatnot. But if even if they have done it, they have sort of now saved everybody else from doing it on them on themselves by themselves. So something like that, I feel like there could be more frameworks like that, where maybe ABI to APIs or ABI to UI and whatnot can be there. And then not everybody has to train their own LLM or fine tune their own LLM on your related repos.
Yeah, I was looking at Mark Jellin's repos, microchip like repos, and then also the Mint base repo. I don't think they have their router open source, and I don't think their wallet,
Yeah,
that's in their original thing. That would be very insightful, because I think there would be a lot of contributors that would want to basically contribute to that framework, and there's a lot of innovation happening on the front in terms of like how to call tools, how to integrate, how to even not only like decide what tools to call, but what LLMs to call for different scenarios. So yeah, I definitely want to have like Micro to get on and
yeah,
explain. Yeah.
cool.
I mean, yeah, we're well over time. Is there anything else that you would like to add before um we well,
Um, Not really, but probably more a call for feedback on what kind of functions do people most use about in their DAOs, and what functions from that list would be a top priority that we could work on. Because um, I did this example a little while ago, but now I'm going to resume and do rest of the functionality of the DAO agent. Um, so whatever everyone's suggestions is and most helpful kind of prompts that they would want to interact with their DAOs, that would be nice. But yeah, that's it.
yeah, I mean personally, I was like someone who's an active member and all, a lot of DAOs, and I've experienced a lot of front end issues. Yeah, the create proposals is a big one. Being able to vote on proposals. One thing about the voting on proposals, I think if you without the front end, without actually like going in there, it's really hard to understand like what the
Yeah,
proposal is. So even a streamlined way to like search and then provide those summaries of like this is the most similar proposal, render what that proposal is, maybe display it
yeah,
markdown, and yeah, and then kind of execute on that. even being able to like approve batch proposals. I kind of wanted like in the case for build out, like we have a lot of proposals where it's like
To
if
add members.
yeah, if well, not necessarily add members, but if like Elliot has approved something and he's the DRI, like I just want to copy his votes and just be like, hey, everything
Yeah.
is approved and approved. Like so more like smart kind of actions in the Astra Plus Plus they began to
Mm,
build that like they towards like the end of their software life cycle they kind of added it so you can basically approve all in mass and then kind of execute there. But I like really like Richmark because a lot of times how we when we operate as a DAO, like we'll basically um like send the DAO like we'll ask permission for the DAO to do things off chain. So hey, the DAO needs to get into an agreement with another entity, and we'll basically like draft a proposal, say, hey, can this person act as an official designator for this? So it's a lot of
mm,
actual text-based proposals, not even transfers, so that there is an on-chain record that the DAO approved, and because uh, there is an actual legal entity that is only operated on what that DAO says. So actually having the decision making in it and like just like even text-based stuff is really important, although it's not necessarily executing anything. It's more along the lines of like showing consent that a decision has happened. So that's like I think is kind of overlooked as a text, but something I use a lot.
yeah. 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 I feel like shadow voting proposals, like proposals which wouldn't do anything on chain, but it's just sort of an on chain record of things being voted upon, like all the off chain stuff. It's a cool use case of DAOs as well, just to keep record of things on chain. Yeah, simple text proposals for shadow voting, I think, is a nice thing to do too.
Yeah, and then something that we've been doing like we're building this in the potluck. We also just redid like all the mint base on Boss, and then like we have like an Actis DAO, and so like just even like instead of like making these custom function call proposals and function libraries that were done in Astro DAO, like just being able to like route any agent endpoint and then automatically map it into what a DAO function call proposal I think would be a huge unlock and take a lot of time spent. Like, so yeah, just like kind of consuming existing endpoints and agents and then outputting DAO function calls.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, an agent would converts simple transaction into DAO proposals would be really nice. So that um, other entities could access it as well, because login as a DAO, I think, is a very much requested feature on all apps, because it's just difficult to put in all these custom function calls in your DAO. You'll have to go through three different interfaces to find out, and then the possibility of making a error is so much. Um, yeah, I think login as a DAO is also something that the whole agenting framework could tackle on.
All right, dope. Yeah, thank you so much for coming out, showing us. There I'll also link if you can send me everything on Telegram, like of the
Yeah,
DAO. I'll um I'll link it there in like the description as well. But yeah, thanks so much for coming out and breaking things out. And I'm looking very much forward to seeing a world where we can operate our DAOs directly from the wallet and we have more insights,
yeah,
not just restricted by Astra Plus Plus inside of a few
yeah,
gateways because we don't have cores access via the Pikes Peak indexer and it doesn't
yeah,
work places. So yeah, really love the work
yeah.
that you're doing and yeah, keeping the loop.
Thanks, bud. See you. Thank you.